Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside your own front door, and being told that the very grass beneath your feet doesn't belong to you anymore. That your yard, the one you mow, water, and cherish, isn't yours at all. It's community. Property, and worse, the person saying this isn't a city official, not a judge, not even someone with a shred of authority. It's my HOA's self-appointed queen. It's Karen. The same Karen who polices trash cans like she's the FBI, who carries a ruler to measure fence heights, who probably dreams in bylaws. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your yard is actually a park." At first I laughed. I thought it was one of those bizarre Karen jokes, where reality and entitlement get tangled up until she actually believes her fantasy. But she wasn't joking. She stood there, arms folded, lips pinched, radiating the kind of smugness only Karen can produce. "The neighborhood kids will be playing here from now on," she added. Imagine the audacity. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decree. My blood boiled, but somewhere deep inside, a spark lit up, because I realized something. If she wanted to treat my yard like a park, I was going to give her one. But not the way she expected. Stick with me, because what I did next turned the entire neighborhood upside down. That first confrontation replayed in my head all day. I looked at my yard, the flower beds I built, the grass I nurtured, the little stone path winding up to the porch, and all I could see was her smug face telling me it wasn't mine. You ever feel that fire inside, that no, not today kind of anger? That's what hit me. But instead of lashing out, I let it simmer. I knew I couldn't just fight Karen head-on. You don't swing fists at a storm, you outsmart it, you redirect it. And so, the craziest idea I've ever had began forming. If she wanted a park, I'd give her a venue. Not just a space for kids. No. I'd build something that would drown out her authority. Her fake rules, her entire HOA kingdom. I would build a concert venue right in front of her house. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't start with a stage and blaring speakers. This wasn't overnight. First, I played it subtle. Set out lawn chairs, bought a few tiki torches, and invited some friends over for a small gathering. We had music, laughter, and food, completely harmless. But oh, you should have seen Karen's face when she peeked through her blinds. Her so-called park wasn't filled with quiet kids playing tag. It was alive, buzzing, loud enough for her to hear every single word. And in that moment, I realized the real show hadn't even started yet. Here's the thing. People are drawn to energy. And my yard started attracting neighbors, not because of the HOA, not because of Karen, but because they could feel the fun. One by one, families wandered over. Parents brought their lawn chairs. Kids danced barefoot in the grass. The sound of laughter drowned out Karen's whispers of control. I saw something happening, something powerful. The neighborhood wasn't following her anymore. They were following me. Do you see where this is going? She sure didn't. And Karen, oh, Karen. She marched over, her little clipboard clutched like a weapon. "This is against HOA rules," she barked. But here's the kicker, she couldn't even point to a rule I was breaking, because, technically, I was just hosting friends. I smiled, offered her a hot dog, and watched the steam come out of her ears. She stormed off, muttering something about citations, but it was too late. The stage was set. The battle line was drawn, not in ink or paper, but in laughter, in music. In the simple joy of being free in our own homes, but I wasn't satisfied yet. I wanted more. If my yard was a park, I was going to turn it into the most unforgettable park this neighborhood had ever seen. I went online, found some portable stage panels, rented a sound system, and called up a few local musicians I knew. At first, they thought I was joking. "You want us to play? In your front yard?" But when I explained, when I painted the picture of standing up against a tyrannical HOA Karen, they were all in. You see, resistance has a rhythm. Rebellion has a beat. And mine was about to echo through every cul-de-sac in this community. The first real concert night came faster than I expected. The stage was set, string lights hung from tree to tree, speakers humming with anticipation. Families brought blankets, coolers, and folding chairs, lining up the sidewalks, like it was the 4th of July, and me. I stood there, looking at the crowd gathering in my yard. The yard, Karen swore, was public property, and felt a rush I can't even describe. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every homeowner who'd ever felt silenced, controlled, or bullied by an HOA. It was about showing Karen that her power ended at my property line. When the first notes of music filled the air, the whole block came alive. Kids danced under the stars, parents sang along, the sound vibrated through the street, and where was Karen? Standing on her porch, arms crossed, glaring daggers. But the more she glared, the louder the cheers became. And I knew, deep down, she realized she was losing. Not just losing a fight over a yard, but losing her grip on everyone who used to fear her clipboard. Halfway through the concert, something unexpected happened. An elderly neighbor one Karen had harassed for years about the color of his shutters walked up to me with tears in his eyes, said thank you for giving us this, for standing up. And I tell you, that hit me harder than the music. Harder than Karen's anger, because this wasn't petty revenge anymore. It was community. It was healing. It was people finally remembering what freedom feels like. And that's when I knew I couldn't stop here. This was just the beginning. But as the night went on, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Karen disappeared from her porch. First I thought she'd retreated, maybe sulking inside. But then, through the crowd, I spotted her. On the phone, her lips moved fast, her finger pointed at the stage, her eyes narrowed. And that's when it hit. Karen wasn't giving up. She was calling reinforcements. Maybe the HOA board, maybe the police, maybe both. And suddenly, the music, the joy, the rebellion, it all felt fragile. Because I knew one wrong move could turn this from victory to disaster. Still, I stood tall, because no matter what happened next, I wasn't backing down. Not to Karen, not to anyone. What if she wanted a park, she got a venue. Fight. Well, she was about to get a show she'd never forget. Stay with me, because what happened after that phone call changed everything. The phone call hung heavy in the air, like thunder, is about to crack the sky. Karen wasn't just pacing and whispering anymore. She was animated, jabbing her finger toward my yard as if pointing at the heart of a crime scene. And in her world, joy, laughter, and music were crimes. The band played on, the kids danced, the parents cheered, but my eyes stayed locked on her. Something was coming. You could feel it ripple through the air, that uneasy balance between freedom and authority. And just when the final chords of the first set rang out, headlights cut through the night, red and blue lights flickered, Karen had called the police. The crowd hushed. Parents pulled their kids closer. A few neighbors whispered, nervous that maybe Karen had finally found a way to shut it all down. My chest tightened. I had been prepared for Karen's clipboard, for her hollow threats, but not for this. The officers stepped out, their faces neutral, and walked toward me. Karen practically skipped from her porch, her voice shrill and triumphant. There, right there. He's running an illegal concert venue in a residential zone. Shut it down. Duh. Officers looked at me, then at the crowd. They didn't see chaos. They didn't see danger. They saw families sitting in lawn chairs, music filling the air, kids smiling like it was summer break. One of them turned back to Karen and asked, "Ma'am, what exactly is the problem here?" In that moment, that pause was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Karen sputtered. She waved her arms. She pulled out the HOA rulebook like it was a badge. "He can't do this. It's against the bylaws," she shrieked. But the officer calmly replied, "We enforce the law, not your HOA policies. Unless there's a violation of city ordinances, this isn't our concern." The crowd erupted in cheers. You could see Karen's face twist, every vein in her forehead threatening to pop. She wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not in front of an audience. And I smiled, thanked the officers, and invited them to grab a plate of food. To my surprise, they stayed a while. They laughed, they ate, they even tapped their feet to the music. Karen retreated to her porch, defeated but not destroyed, and I knew she wasn't done, not by a long shot. That night ended like a celebration. Strangers who had lived side by side for years finally bonded. They swapped stories, vented about Karen, and shared laughs under the glow of string lights. But even as the last neighbor left and I began cleaning up, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's face, the fury, the humiliation. People like her don't let things go. They escalate. And sure enough, I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, a letter appeared on my doorstep. It was crisp, official looking, with the HOA letterhead stamped at the top. My stomach tightened as I read, "Notice of violation. Unauthorized use of property as a public venue." They accused me of running a business, of profiting off my yard, of turning the neighborhood into an unsafe gathering place. None of it was true, of course. I hadn't charged a dime. But the letter wasn't about truth. It was about intimidation. It was about Karen. I could have caved right there. Many neighbors had before me, a fine here, a threat there, and eventually they bent under the weight of her control. But this time was different. This wasn't just my fight anymore, belonged to every person she had silenced with those letters. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself. I was going to double down. Instead of canceling the next gathering, I made it bigger. Flyers went out, word spread, and soon, people from outside our block wanted in. Musicians offered. To play for free, local food trucks reached out. Suddenly, my little act of defiance was turning into something bigger, a movement. Concerts in the cul-de-sac became the phrase buzzing through the neighborhood. And the more it grew, the more Karen unraveled. But with growth came risk. More cars lined the streets. More noise filled the air. Karen didn't just call the HOA anymore, she called the city. Inspectors showed up, clipboards in hand, asking questions, measuring distances, scribbling notes. Every time they came, my heart pounded. Would this be the end? Would they shut me down? But then something unexpected kept happening. The inspectors found nothing wrong, because I had done my homework. Noise permits, property rights, local ordinances, I knew them better than Karen did. For once, her weapon of choice rules was turned against her, and yet the pressure grew. Neighbors started whispering about what Karen might try next. Some feared lawsuits, others worried about retaliation. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the faces of those kids dancing, that elderly man thanking me, the police officers, who had chosen laughter over Karen shrieking. I knew this wasn't just about concerts anymore. This was about freedom. This was about standing up when someone tries to steal your joy, your rights, your peace. The second major concert was scheduled for a Saturday night, and I went all out. Bigger stage, better lights, a local band with a real following. People showed up in droves, families, teenagers, even strangers from the next neighborhood over. My street pulsed with life. And just as the first song rang out, I noticed movement. Across the street, Karen's blinds fluttered, then slammed shut. Minutes later, her porch light flicked on, and I knew.
Ow.
She was plotting. Halfway through the night, just as the music hit its peak, Karen stormed out of her house. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her came the HOA board members, their arms crossed, their faces grim. They walked straight into the crowd, ignoring the laughter, ignoring the joy, and confronted me in front of everyone. "This ends tonight," one of them barked. Karen's smile stretched ear to ear. She thought she had me cornered. But I looked. At the sea of faces around my neighbors who had finally found their voice, families who had chosen community over Contraland, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. And the words that left my mouth silenced even Karen's gloating. I said, "This isn't my concert. It's our concert. And you'll have to shut down all of us to stop it." The crowd roared. Karen's smile cracked. The board members shifted. Uncomfortably, for the first time, maybe ever, I saw the fear in her eyes. She realized the truth. She didn't just pick a fight with me. She picked a fight with everyone. But if you think that stopped her, you don't know? Karen, because what she did next turned this story from a neighborhood squabble into an all-out war. War doesn't always start with explosions. Sometimes it begins with a single envelope slipped under your door. A week after the second concert, I woke up to a stack of letters certified mail, stamped with authority. Not one, not two, but 7 violation notices, each more absurd than the last. Improper use of outdoor lighting, unauthorized assembly of more than 10 people, commercial activity without license. They were throwing everything they had at me, grasping at straws, and at the bottom of each, fine. Thousands of dollars in total. My stomach sank. For the first time, I wondered if maybe Karen had finally found a way to crush me, but then I remembered the faces. The children twirling in the grass, the elderly neighbors trembling thank you, the cheers when the police refused to play Karen's game. This wasn't just my battle anymore, it was ours. I snapped pictures of the letters, posted them online, and within hours the comments flooded in. Neighbors rallied, strangers offered legal advice, even local reporters started asking questions. Karen thought she could isolate me with paperwork. Instead, she had just made me louder. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Karen walked in like a queen returning to her throne, flanked by board members. The room was packed, dozens of neighbors, crammed into folding chairs, some standing against the walls. For once, no one was silent. Murmurs filled the air. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I held up the violation letters, let them flutter to the table, and asked a single question. Do you really believe? My yard belongs to you? Silence. No one dared answer. Karen tried to, of course. She launched into a tirade about community standards, about how property wasn't truly private if it affected others. But for every sentence she spoke, someone from the crowd pushed back. A father shouted, "My kids finally have somewhere safe to play." A mother added, "This is the first time I've known my neighbors in 10 years. Even the board members shifted uneasily. For the first time, Karen's authority didn't command the room. Mine did, and that's when she snapped. She stood, slammed her fists on the table, and screamed, "If you people won't enforce the rules, I'll take this to court myself." The room erupted in gasps. Court. She was willing to drag me through the legal system, to bleed me dry with lawyers and fees just to prove a point. And as much as I wanted to laugh it off, a pit of fear opened in my chest. Because lawsuits aren't just noise, they're weapons. And Karen had just unsheathed hers. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and strategy. She filed the suit as an actual lawsuit as EOT accusing me of operating a business, disturbing the peace, even devaluing property values. The absurdity was almost comical, but the threat was real. If she won, I could lose everything. My savings, my home, my peace. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had gone too far. But every morning, I woke to texts, messages, knocks on my door, neighbors, reminding me I wasn't alone. One even handed me a check, whispering for the legal fees. Don't give up. The third concert became a rallying cry. Bigger than ever, but this time it wasn't just about music. It was about defiance. It was about showing Karen, the board, and anyone watching that we wouldn't be silenced by fear. We held signs, gave speeches. And when the band struck their first chord, the cheer that rose up wasn't just joy, was a roar of resistance. Karen was there, of course. She always was. Standing at the edge of the crowd, filming everything with her phone, probably dreaming of showing it all to a judge. But then something happened even she couldn't have anticipated. The local news van pulled up. Cameras rolled. Reporters interviewed families, captured kids laughing, caught the music soaring against the night sky. Suddenly, this wasn't just a neighborhood spat. It was a story. And Karen, she wasn't the hero of it. She was the villain. The next morning, the headline hit, "Local HOA battles homeowner over concerts, community stands together." The article didn't just tell my side, it told our side. Neighbors quoted, families defended, children pictured mid-dance. And in every shot of Karen, her face twisted in rage. She looked less like a protector and more like a tyrant. Was turning, and she knew it. But Karen never surrenders. If anything, the spotlight only fueled her obsession. She doubled down, filing motion after motion, pushing the lawsuit forward, determined to bury me under legal fees. And as much as the community rallied, the pressure was real, bills piled up, nights grew heavier. There were moments, dark moments, where I considered folding, selling, moving away, letting her win. Because isn't that easier than drowning in a fight you never asked for? And then, something unexpected happened. At the fourth concert, in the middle of a song, the music cut. Silence fell. And from the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward, a man in a crisp suit, with a voice that carried authority. "I'm your lawyer now," he announced, "pro bono. We're going to take this fight all the way." My knees nearly buckled. He explained he had seen the story on the news, recognized the injustice, and decided to step in. Suddenly, I wasn't just some homeowner fighting alone. I had a professional on my side. The crowd roared. Karen's face, pale, shaking, twisted in a way I'd never seen. For the first time, maybe ever, she looked scared, because she realized this wasn't just a game of fines and threats anymore. This was a war in which she wasn't the only one with weapons. Concerts kept growing, the community kept uniting, and the lawsuit inched closer to its day in court. And as we prepared for the battle of our lives, one question burned in my mind. Would justice finally silence Karen, or was she about to unleash her most dangerous move yet? Courtrooms don't buzz with music or laughter, they hum with tension. The day finally came, months after Karen filed her lawsuit. I stood in a stiff suit of my own, my lawyer beside me, staring across the aisle at Karen. She looked different. Here, not like the queen of the cul-de-sac, but like someone who had bet everything on one final hand. Her stack of papers was thick, her glare sharp, but for the first time, I saw the tremor in her hands. She knew this was it. The judge called us to order. Karen's lawyer began first, painting me as a reckless rebel who turned a peaceful neighborhood into a commercial circus. He threw around phrases like public nuisance and diminished property values. Karen nodded along, her lips tight, as if every word was gospel, but then it was our turn. My lawyer rose, calm and steady, and began dismantling their case. Piece by piece. He presented the permits I'd secured, the noise levels I'd measured, the testimonies from neighbors who said they finally felt like a community. He didn't just argue legality, he argued humanity. This case isn't about property values, he said, his voice ringing clear. It's about control versus community, fear versus freedom. And the question before this court is simple. Do we allow one person's obsession to strangle the joy of many? The room was silent. Even the judge leaned forward. Then came the testimonies. Neighbor after neighbor took the stand, telling stories of how the concerts had changed everything. A single mother explained how her kids had found friends for the first time. An elderly veteran described feeling alive again, saying he hadn't smiled like this in years. Parents, teenagers, families, they all spoke, and with each word, Karen's armor cracked. By the time the elderly man with the shutter violations walked up, tears in his eyes, and said, "We were prisoners in our own homes until this happened." Karen wasn't glaring anymore. She was shrinking. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't bring anger. I brought truth. I described the first moment Karen told me my yard was a park. The insult, the spark, it lit inside me. I told them about the laughter, the dancing, the unity it created. And I ended with this. If defending my yard means defending my neighbor's joy, then I'll never apologize for it. Karen had her chance to respond, and she tried. She ranted about rules, about bylaws, about the importance of order. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't about protecting the neighborhood. It was about protecting her control. Everyone in that courtroom could feel it. The judge recessed, and the weight felt like ours. My palms were slick with sweat, my heart pounding so loud I could barely think. When he finally returned, the gavel struck, and the words that followed hit like thunder. Case dismissed. The room erupted. Neighbors hugged me, cheered, clapped. My lawyer shook my hand firmly, whispering, "You won more than just a case. You won your freedom." Cross. The aisle Karen sat frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling. For once, she had no clipboard, no fines, no rules to hide behind. She had lost. But here's the thing. This story doesn't end with her defeat. It ends with what came after. The concerts continued, but they weren't just mine anymore. Neighbors took turns hosting, music flowed from house to house, and the street became more alive than it had ever been. The HOA. After the case, their power shrank. Rules softened. People stopped fearing the letters. They started living again. As for Karen, she retreated. Her blinds stayed closed, her porch empty. Some say she still makes phone calls, still mutters about bylaws. But the truth is she lost more than a lawsuit. She lost her crown, her control, her kingdom of fear. And in her place, something better grew. When I look back now, I don't just see a yard or a stage or a lawsuit. I see a spark that turned into a fire, one that spread through an entire neighborhood. I see people who learned that freedom isn't given as claimed. And I see proof that sometimes the loudest music isn't from the speakers. It's from voices raised together. So if you're listening to this right now, remember this. Never let someone tell you your joy doesn't belong to you. Never let control masquerade as order.
Okay.
And when someone tries to silence you, whether it's with fines, rules, or even lawsuits, stand taller, sing louder, fight harder. Because at the end of the day, your home is yours. Your freedom is yours. And your story is yours too, right? And if you've made it this far, thank you for being part of mine. If you felt something in this fight, if you believe in standing up against unfair control, share this story. Let others know they don't have to bow to fear. And above all, stick around until the end. Sometimes the battles that feel impossible are the ones that change everything.